In the last episode of Inner Work Essentials, we explored the question of how long it takes to heal. And I made a case that healing is not a fixed timeline, but is rather dictated by the quality and consistency of introspective, self-compassionate attention and action over the course of multiple years. And I made an even stronger case that actually, although this may seem daunting at first, a lot can be done in just the first year of focused work. But this still leaves the question of which healing modalities, which therapeutic interventions or theories should we include as part of a holistic framework towards self-healing without the need to go for an expensive course or maybe an expensive therapeutic support. In addition to body-based healing, so somatic healing in the form of cathartic release, artistic expression, and all-round everyday lifestyle change such as healthy diet and a consistent exercise routine, I would argue that it's parts work which is a key pillar in any genuinely introspective inner work journey. You've likely heard of things that we've explored in this series before, such as inner child work, the masculine or feminine archetypes, as well as any other theoretical or abstract model of some kind of fragmented personality parts which live inside of us. And today we're going to go into the golden goose, strange phrase, but the golden goose of parts work modalities specifically for trauma, and that's internal family systems. Unsurprisingly, today's inner work essential is internal family systems. Excuse the lack of front cover, but I personally hate hardcovers with paper on top. I mean, this looks so much better. This is Internal Family Systems by Richard Schwartz, 2nd edition. Crucially 2nd edition because he rewrote pretty much the whole book. And of the 350 or so books that I've read in that library related to inner work, this book is top 5. I think my second read, my manual highlighting and typing of notes, is about 50 pages. So there's a lot to cover. It is truly one of those theories, one of those grand theories of parts work, which has been really useful in my healing journey and in the one-to-one journeys that I've been privileged to support and witness myself professionally from a client basis. So where do we start? What do I talk about in the next 10-15 minutes to hopefully convince you that this is something which is worth your time? I've had a real challenge to try and decide. There really is so many different avenues of approach when it comes to IFS, Internal Family Systems. And initially, I picked out two quotes which I feel really capture the essence of this therapy and will hopefully encourage you to do the reading yourself. This book is a little bit more on the pricey side. I think it's about $30. You can't really get it cheaper, but it's so worth it, and the time investment's worth it too. So I've reduced down to just one quote, which I'm going to read from this book right now, which in my opinion captures the essence of what Richard Schwartz is trying to do with his trauma interventions to help us heal the internal conflicts and the fragmentation, the feeling of being at war with ourselves and having symptomatic responses like depression, anxiety, paranoia, all of the lists of symptoms. This quote captures what he's trying to do. So, from the book. There we go. So you can see heavy annotations throughout the book. It was very difficult to pick. I'm still second guessing myself on if this is the quote, but we'll go with it. Quote from the book. Every bit of guidance and every clinical example in this book aims to help you and your clients access the self, capital S, self. IFS asserts that the self exists, cannot be damaged, can often be accessed quickly, knows how to heal, moves to correct inner and outer injustice with an open heart, and becomes the good attachment presence for parts and people alike. If you have no idea what I'm saying when I say capital S self, this is the higher self. Some would even say it's the soul. Some would say it's actually more of a superego concept. It's a concept of having a healthy, centralized ego, but self is really the word. Different Jungian theories, different Freudian theories, it all comes back to this idea of self. And what IFS is trying to do in a nutshell is help us to resolve those internal conflicts, those feelings of duality and tension inside of our psyche, inside of our body, by depolarizing progressively that tension, by mapping out the territory, by identifying the parts who live at different ends of these polarities, and raise it all to a higher level. So raising it to that self perspective, which you just heard about. It's almost like what we're doing within IFS, which ultimately is a systems therapy. It's a systems theory, internal family systems. We're recognizing the multiplicity of the psyche, the idea that we have a fragmented mind, a compartmentalizing ego making structure by default. This is the result of our conditioning and our biology. It's why we have things like an inner child. It's why we're influenced and magnetized by different archetypal forces. We are hardwired for multiplicity. This is the multiplicity of the psyche, the multiple mind. Each part exists within that system or that internal family, and the tensions which arise are between different parts wanting different things. Really simplifying here. You've probably already heard some of these ideas before. What's special with IFS and what's really useful for this series is that, unlike other therapists that I've seen who really place a core emphasis on the part itself or being the therapist who does something to heal the client, Schwartz says no. It's not my job. My job is to be in my higher self energy, to be in my central, grounded, autonomous, and very light, calm, curious, connected, clear-minded presence, and mirror that and set that tone for the person I'm working with. I notice it when I'm doing one-to-one sessions with people as well. I actually take this idea from Schwartz directly, and it's about somatically centering myself as someone who's in that energy. I'll try and do it. I'll make a change. It's about knowing. It's about really connecting in. The smile comes up, the lightness opens up. We're not even talking about a particular topic, but if you were presenting to me a certain problem, a certain agony, and I could receive that in my high self energy, it brings it out of you. And that is all that good therapy is trying to do from Schwartz's perspective. Every part, and he's got a three-part system. He's got a three-category system for characterizing parts. He's got Exiles, Managers, and Firefighters, which maybe I'll explain a little bit in a moment. It doesn't even matter about the categories. That's just a way of understanding the map-making nature of that internal cartography. It's understanding the territory. It's understanding the tensions that I tried to explain earlier. All we're doing at that level, all we're doing at the many levels, even of like a shadow unconscious level, so you've got an unconscious pull perhaps towards a certain financial or sexual shadow, and then you've got an above board ego identity that behaves in an opposite way. There's still that tether which creates a conflict which may be lived up here, but then a certain moment comes in business or in love 6 months into the future, and suddenly, boom, it erupts from that underbelly of latent potential, because the conflict was there the whole time. You saw it in your dreams, you saw it in your daydreams, you saw it in the way that occasionally you'd be a little bit off. That's one example of a tension between conscious and unconscious territory. The exiles in IFS are generally more sensitive, more wounded parts, usually younger parts that carry burdens. They are not the burdens, they aren't the symptom of depression, they aren't the anorexia or the bulimia or the horrible experience itself. they carry that. The part is not the burden. The exile in this case has many gifts, but they are exiled into the unconscious. As one example. And then the managers and the firefighters are the protective elements. They basically have the same function. A manager could be someone who's perfectionistic, someone who's very authoritarian and disciplined, tries to keep the exile and the whole system, that internal family system, in order. Keeps us somewhat rigid, somewhat combined in a way that we can face the world and not be entirely overwhelmed, which often the exiles do feel. The firefighter, on the other hand, is the more explosive force, the more reactive force that feels something like that unconscious pull. Let's go for that unconscious business or sexual shadow tension that's always been tethered to a part of our public persona and is just about to erupt out the surface. In the IFS model, either a manager or a firefighter responds or reacts. The manager, it generally has a structure. So a structure, for example, of certain ways of being culturally, not having certain types of conversation come out publicly. That would be the first level of defense against this unconscious element who has something to teach us, usually in quite a confronting way, that sudden shadow attack. That's responding. Reacting is the firefighter's job, and he's going to come in, or she's going to come in, usually with all of that symptomatic distraction technique. So this is when something like a sexual shadow might come up with a colleague, and there's a moment where, I don't know, I haven't worked in an office in years. I briefly worked in an office at a charity organisation in the UK that looks after national woodland. But imagine I was in the office and I had a crush on someone and it was completely inappropriate for me to express that in the work environment. But then I found I'm kind of getting a look, I'm taking a peek. That's kind of where I start noticing it. And then a moment comes where I say something, maybe that's coming up in quite a way. The manager's going to come in. Manager says, hey, we're not doing that. Not in this environment. We're going to do social codes, social norms. Firefighter might come in at that level of intensity where I make a flirty comment. I do something which is maybe pushing the barrier. Maybe I even ask this woman out on a date and I get rejected because I clearly crossed the cultural boundary. I know people date at the office. You can tell I don't live in this environment, but imagine for the sake of, it's a very celibate, very priestly office, and this is completely verboten. We don't do this. If I still asked and I felt all the shame that came up with that, the firefighter might come in with a defense mechanism like overeating, undereating, substance abuse, or outright isolation and deep shaming. Excuse my laptop. What the firefighter is trying to do here is rapidly put out the emotional fire that's rising up rapidly from an unconscious place. This is just one example of many different dialectic tensions that IFS tries to resolve. We try and look at each internal conflict with these three categories of exile, firefighter, and manager, while primarily shifting as much fragmented, dissociated, disconnected, distanced, and otherwise misplaced or twisted attention upwards. Not necessarily just upwards, because then you've got a dissociative tendency where you become the floating head which you're already tired of being, but centers deeper into the heart, deeper into the belly, healthily into sexuality. Even saying that, I did it as I pointed to the different parts of myself. More space, more calm, more connectedness, more clarity. It's from this place that we healthily detach, we healthily dissociate with a clear intention to try and look at these opposites that are waging war inside of us, calm down that system. I can't go into too much more about the specifics of how we do this in just this video. I highly, highly recommend, again, top 5 book of 350 books that I've read so far. Internal Family Systems Therapy, 2nd edition. This is bread and butter stuff. If you already like Jungian archetypes, if you've looked at maybe the maidens, the feminine archetype, maybe the fourfold structure that I covered in King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, and you like that idea, Internal Family Systems is a way of bringing that archetypal awareness from a different school of philosophy and psychology into a trauma-oriented modality and weave in so many dozens, potentially, of different parts and archetypes which can sometimes wage war for our attention, while also grounding ourself in our capital S self. And this is to say nothing of a more spiritual, more soulful essence, which definitely comes along for the journey. So if you've enjoyed hearing about this idea, please, for the 5th time this video, read the book. The reason why I'm structuring this video and the whole series in this way is that I don't believe I have too much special to offer, and all I can do at this very first stage of building out on YouTube is trying to encourage you to take notice initially, but then actually take the resources that really are the top of the pile and will save you so many years of sporadic effort and get a lot done in that first focused year of inner work. So if you've enjoyed this episode and you want to take it to the next step and you want me to be presumptuous about the kind of person you actually are, then next episode of Inner Work Essentials, we're going to look at giftedness, your giftedness specifically, and how to heal the alienation and societal repulsion that you've been feeling all these years. I'll see you over there.